I want to thank everybody for being here today. I also want to thank Representative Patty, Senator Hancock, as well as Senator Schwartner for being here, as well as Brad Jones from ERCOT and Peter Lake, the chair of the Public Utilities Commission. A top priority that we had this legislative session was to fix the power grid to prevent any other power grid failure in the future. The legislature passed comprehensive reforms to fix all of the flaws that led to the power failure. There is now greater accountability in the system than ever before, with sweeping reforms of both ERCOT and the Public Utilities Commission, and more oversight by the Railroad Commission. There is improved weatherization of power generation, natural gas, and transmission facilities to better handle extreme weather. The Railroad Commission and ERCOT now must inspect these facilities, and failure to weatherize can result in penalties of up to $1 million. Power grid integrity is also improved to prevent essential power generating transmission facilities from being shut down by ERCOT, like what happened in the storm. Communication and coordination are also improved. They were improved among state agencies as well as with the public. And they're improved about the extreme weather conditions as well as power outages. Along those lines, one thing that was created in these reforms was the Texas Power Outage Alert to inform Texans about power shortages. Bottom line is that everything that needed to be done was done to fix the power grid in Texas. And so, to commemorate this, I am honored to be able to sign two of the leading bills that achieve these goals. First is SB 2. And second is SB 3. Power grid reform in Texas is now law. All right. Now, additional information will be provided by the members who join with us today. We'll start at the end and move the way forward. Senator Schwartner, why don't you begin? Tell them which bill you authored and tell them everything that was done.
Sure. Thank you, Governor. I want to first congratulate and acknowledge the great work of the members of the legislature. All members of the Senate participated, and I know many members, if not all the members of the House participated. Senate Bill 3 is the largest reform of the electric generation and natural gas distribution system since deregulation of energy in 2005. It addresses coordination, communication, oversight, and reliability. It is an omnibus bill that does, as the governor said, addresses many of the concerns that were brought forth by the Valentine's Day storm. I'm very proud of the legislature and what we were able to accomplish in a short amount of time to make sure that when you turn the light switch on, that stays on.
Thank you. Mr. Hancock.
And then Senate Bill 2, we sponsored Senate Bill 2, and really what it is, total reform of ERCOT. I mean, one of the things, as we spend hours and hours in the Senate, and I know in the House as well, really focus on making sure, number one, that we took care of consumers. We talk about the legislation, we talk about ERCOT, we talk about the system. Our ultimate goal was to make sure that those individuals, those consumers, our constituents back home, never ever had to deal with this issue ever again. And that was the charge we had. We wanted to take care of consumers and make sure that we had a reliable, affordable, and a system that would maintain an integrity for our economy to continue to grow at the record pace that it's grown for years to come. And we felt like that all started with leadership. And so in Senate Bill 2, we completely reformed ERCOT. ERCOT previously was formed of industry experts, which was all great. But we found in our conversations, in our hearings, that there began to be some conflicts of interest. And so we blew it up. It is a completely independent board now whose 100% focus, whose entire goal is making sure that ERCOT stays strong, reliable, stable, and affordable, continue to grow our great economy. We looked across the globe at what other reforms were, how were other boards made up, and we comprised that into this new form that we make sure that now the ERCOT board has one obligation only, and that is to keep the lights on and make sure, and that's where it starts with the leadership. They are committed, we are committed to making sure that the implementation of this legislation moves forward, both at the PUC, but at the board as well, and we look forward to making sure that we continue the great economy through great provisions, through legislation, that the lights stay on, the machine shops keep working, and there can be confidence now in the system that we have in the great state of Texas.
Thank you. And now Representative Pat.
Thank you, Governor, and I had the privilege of working with these two gentlemen on both SB2 and SB3 on the House side, so we had a few things going on, and I would remind you, there were a whole lot of other bills as well that we were not necessarily doing signings on, but were part of the greater solution. When we came into this session and had this event, we immediately were focused, and I appreciate the Speaker and his leadership, and the Lieutenant Governor and the Senators on their side, and really working collaboratively to address what we found very quickly to be the major issues. Oversight and accountability, communications failures that were happening throughout the system, and then, of course, the weatherization issues. And I think in these bills, particularly SB3, we address all of those, and SB2 as well. We look at ERCOT for the reasons that Senator Hancock explained. We found a system that wasn't working properly, that we had folks that were serving in those capacities who might have had their own best interests at heart as opposed to the ERCOT system itself and citizens in Texas. And so I think we performed that very well. I will remind you that not only with these bills, but many other bills dealing with some of the structural issues, but also securitization and other things, every one of these with an eye towards the consumer. Every one of these are about doing things that are going to help consumers, whether it's making sure that their bills are going to remain low and that they don't experience extreme financial hardship as a result of this event, or making sure that we don't have another one of these events. Every one of these issues are focused on the consumers, and so for anyone who says that we weren't focused on consumers throughout this process, I disagree very, very strongly. And so I'm excited about what we've got done here. There's more to be done. I also appreciate the work of the PUC and the ERCOT, who are already working very hard. There's some workshops going on last week where they're already beginning the process of implementation of these bills, even before they were signed, working on those issues and trying to address some of the issues as it relates to the market structure that we also want to continue to look at to make sure that we have a system that is working, that is going to continue to send the right signals to the market to incentivize the type of generation that we need to continue to be able to support the growth that we've experienced in Texas. We want that to continue. And for that to happen, we have to have a stable grid, and people have to have confidence in the system as it relates to our electricity. And so I'm very proud of the work this body has done. I thank the Governor for his leadership as well on these issues, and I'm very proud to be here today, Governor.
Thank you very much. Listen, we know that there's so much more to say about this, and there may be a lot of questions about this. And so we welcome any and all questions you all can ask about the power grid so that we can make sure that the public is fully informed about everything that was done to ensure that the power grid is fixed in Texas.
Yeah, Governor, you actually said back in February that you were open to anything, questions you just said just now, and you actually said that you would actually do an investigation into ERCOT and an immediate transparency of ERCOT. You turned down multiple times public information requests by what your representatives were doing at ERCOT at the time. You had two people there. One gentleman was called Mr. Ramos. I'm sure you know him. So are you ever going to release those documents so we can see what happened? Because we do know that the maximum power charge was $9,000. That stayed on for days after the event ended. Do we know what happened?
Sure. Any and all documents that were subject to a PIA request have been turned over. If you let me finish my statement, have been turned over to the people in charge of that in the office. and they make the decisions about which documents are authorized to be released and which are not. So we've turned over all documents that may exist by anybody.
Next question, next question, sorry, sir.
Concerned that these reforms that are being called for certainly won't be in place during the peak summer demand. And there's also concern that they may not be in place during the next winter storm event when that happens. Are you concerned about that?
So really, first, I will disagree with you about that. As both the members and as necessary, the ERCOT and PUC chairs can weigh in on this. They are fully prepared to ensure that the power grid is stable both during the summer as well as the winter. But I'll first open it up to the members to tell you more why.
Yeah, and Maria, I'll tell you, I mean, we're in a lot better position today. I mean, we saw in the hearing that PUC is already moving in the direction to implement some of the things that were discussed in it. But also our reserve capacity is much different today than it was. We're going to be at 15.8 reserve, which we've been down at 13, which means we got that reserve capacity coming. We have 20,000 megawatts of solar coming online for this summer. Even though we're looking at a capacity of 75,000 megawatts, we still have that reserve. And if you go into 2022, based on what's already in the queue, what we know is coming, we're looking at a reserve capacity of 28%. And so when you look at our system continues to grow, and we continue to have investment that helps meet the demands that we have on our load. And so that's why if you look at the report that ERCOT had out regarding summer capacity, that they feel very comfortable that we'll be able to meet the demands this summer.
What about winter?
I would say saying behind us is evidence of the new leadership at both ERCOT and the PUC, which in and of itself leads to better communication, coordination. The entire leadership, entire legislature, the people that work at ERCOT, PUC, and the Railroad Commission understand that this is an issue that is front and center, is on the front burner, and needs to be addressed. And the provisions in SB 3, I have full faith they will take firmly in their hands and run forward in implementing those changes.
I think also, even when we look at scarcity events, which we experienced obviously during this winter storm, which led to some pretty severe financial ramifications, I think already those things are being worked on. I mean, if you happen to have some time to tune into the workshop last week with PUC, you heard from both the PUC and ERCOT, where they were already working on some of these issues, particularly as it relates to ancillary services and situations where we saw those exceed 9,000. They're already addressing that, and there's a very quick timeline on those things. And also, how we address EEA3 situations when we have firm load shed going on, and whether or not that price can stay up there. And so they're already addressing some of those things that I think already will impact some of those financial situations as well. They're also, as we look at this, have plans to stress test these tail events, these very unusual, out of the ordinary type events as well, to ensure that we can be prepared for those type of events in the future.
Governor, how come direct financial assistance to consumers wasn't part of these reforms?
Go ahead.
I mean, it was. I mean, that is what securitization did. In fact, securitization saves consumers hundreds of millions of dollars. In fact, I'd encourage you to read the most recent Moody's report that came out today, talking about the benefits of that. And not only does it save consumers hundreds of millions of dollars, but it provides a financial stability that we need within our system to provide some of the lowest cost electricity in the nation. And don't forget, 98% of consumers are on fixed rate plans, residential. When those contracts are up, they get to shop again. That is the beauty of our market, is if prices go up, they get to shop in an open marketplace to replace with the lowest cost that they choose.
But how does that help consumers who are financially hit hard during this storm?
That's what I was trying to point out, is over 98% residential consumers are on a fixed rate plan that have saw no increase in their utility rates. When that plan is up, they're able to shop again. That's the beauty of our market, and they get to go to the lowest cost. So 98%, Sonny, the securitization that we provide allows that to be another cost savings in lower interest rates as we spread those costs out. So
Paul, let me repeat part of that and provide you some additional information. So just to reiterate, because a lot of people are unfamiliar with what Senator Hancock was just talking about, 98% of the consumers of power during the winter storm were on fixed rate plans. to the extent that there was any meaningful increase or price spike in the cost of power, because those consumers were on fixed rate plans, they did not have to pay that increase. I do want to add something else, however, and that is under the CARES Act, there is $1 billion of funding that is available for low-income housing residents, for them to be able to use that money to pay for any cost associated with this winter storm. And the low-cost housing authorities are already working with Texans around the state to make sure that's available. The PUC is working to get that information out. They will be accelerating and amplifying that process to make sure that the people who do qualify for this know that they have access to that money.
Governor, I have a question. Obviously, Texas has fashioned its energy grid to weatherize against hot summers. Is there any concern that this winterization mandate may come at the expense of being able to stand summer heat?
The short answer is no. The long answer will be provided by the senators and representatives.
Under SB 3, the PUC as well as the Railroad Commission are tasked to weatherize appropriate infrastructure. That is not to the detriment of either the spring, summer, winter, or fall. They put in place appropriate weatherization as they see fit, depending upon the locale of the facility, whether or not you're in the Panhandle or in South Texas, whether or not you're a certain type of generation facility or another. We leave it to the experts to finalize the directive given by this legislature and signed by the governor just now as to how to protect our infrastructure that has to do with energy production.
So let me just add, that's why we call our solution weatherization as opposed to winterization. We want to make sure that the solutions that have been provided address both the summer weather and the winter weather. And we feel, all of us, as well as leaders of the Public Utilities Commission and ERCOT, believe that we have achieved success with regard to weatherizing for both summer and winter.
Governor, I have another question about the public records from ERCOT. There are dozens of media outlets and media individuals who have been denied those records, and you mentioned that you feel like a sufficient amount has been given. Do you personally feel like the amount of information and the lack of records we received has been appropriate given the circumstances?
All I can answer for myself would be any PI request that I received, and I know that.
But do you feel like the amount of information we have about what happened from ERCOT is appropriate given the circumstances that Texans endured?
So, in a way, there's maybe two different questions in what you asked. I can't tell if what you asked are questions that have been raised by Public Information Act request or general information.
I'm asking if you think that information that we have requested of multiple media outlets from the Public Information Act is a sufficient amount of information that's been given to the public.
And so I have no way of knowing what has been received by the press through Public Information Act requests. What I can say is this, and that is anything that the media wants to ask, you have the right to ask right now, which is why we want to make sure you have the opportunity to ask the leaders of the power grid reform whatever question you may have.
Two more questions. Eleanor, back to the consumer protection program, part of this whole bill. Specifically with Senate Bill 3, the $350 ratepayer relief was stripped from the final version of the bill. I know you touched on this a little bit before, but would you mind kind of just explaining why that specific portion was taken out?
That portion of direct ratepayer relief was actually in a different bill that Senator Hancock was authoring. There's a spectrum of how much you can backstop the ratepayers, the consumers of Texas, and there was discussion as to, on the Senate side in particular, of direct ratepayer relief as fashioned by a $350 credit on the utility bill. That's still something up to for discussion and might be visited again. However, it didn't make it across the finish line. But the larger concept is securitizing and allowing for spreading out of the costs both on the natural gas side as well as on the electric side at electric co-ops, regular generation, and municipal-owned utilities was accomplished and will have direct impact on rates going forward, keeping those low. So there are aspects about how far legislation can go, and unfortunately that aspect was not able to be accomplished in this piece of
And I
legislation.
just point out, when we use that 98% number, that includes that we're on fixed rate plans. That includes commercial properties. The vast majority of those that were not on fixed rate plans are commercial type properties and not residential. So when you look at what we did with securitization, lowering the cost to consumers, saving them hundreds of millions of dollars, and the reality that the vast majority, 98% plus of residential homeowners are on a fixed rate plan, and then within our system, if their provider chooses to go up when their contract's up, they don't have to stay with that provider. They're able to go shop again, which is the beauty of our system that we wanted to maintain while maintaining the financial integrity of the system through the securitization.
I would also add that under HB 16, that we got rid of the wholesale index plans for
Correct.
consumers and small businesses, so that those type of problems that were unfortunately manifest during the winter storm will not be seen by residential consumers and small businesses going forward.
Those are,
So if I could make clear what Senator Schwartner was just talking about, and that is, what they passed eliminates price spikes in the future, like what we saw in the past.
Last question, Eleanor?
So, I was gonna ask you, about the, kind of the, teeth in this bill. Do you think there's enough?
I'm sorry, the what?
Teeth in this bill.
Got it.
Is there enough done in this bill to actually incentivize these different power providers to go through with the weatherization process? Someone said it doesn't go far enough. So
I think it goes, yes. The short answer is yes. We raised, there's a penalty matrix that can go up to $1 million per violation, which is a pronounced enhancement over the current penalty structure. That is, the penalty structure now is commensurate with what you see in FERC, the Federal Energy Reliability Council. There is a mandate on the part of the legislature onto the PUC as well as the Railroad Commission to actively, with certain deadlines and timelines, to evaluate this issue and to implement appropriate rules and regulations regarding weatherization that is necessary to support, maintain, and protect the grid in Texas.
I would add, I'm sorry. go ahead.
well, and let me point out, there's no one sitting or standing here who does not remember that week. None of us. Miserable. We don't want people to go through that again. That's why we passed reforms to fix that, to make sure it will never happen again. We're not immune from feeling the hurt and the pain and the loss of people across Texas. We know it, we feel it, we'll never forget it, but we're going to move forward with the reforms that fix the system.
And just to further what they were saying on the teeth in this, there are teeth. The penalty matrix that was mentioned there, I think looking back, we saw the failures of a system that was kind of a suggestion of sorts when it came to submitting weatherization plans, emergency operation plans. There's actual requirements now in that, and there are penalties for noncompliance, and there will be enforcement. The PUC will be doing that. There's additional dollars that have been appropriated.
And inspections as well?
For inspections as well to be able to do that, and so I'm very confident there. I would also mention, I've seen lots of reports from you fine folks that talked about how we took it easy on natural gas and the oil and gas side. I wish you would go tell them that, because that's not what they're whining in my office. That is not what they're saying. And I think maybe part of where that comes from is the confusion on what we did on limiting it more to the mapping process and identifying critical infrastructure. Because again, remember, the whole goal here was to identify critical infrastructure as it relates to the supply chain for electric generation, which does not require weatherization of every single wellhead in this state. And so we were very much focused on, and we accomplished in these bills, the very thing that we set out to do, and that is to improve the reliability of our system and shoring up that supply chain. And so, again, same penalties applying, up to $1 million a day on those incidents, can add up pretty quickly. And so I'm very confident folks are going to comply, because if not, it's going to be pretty punitive if they don't.
Great, thank you all so much for coming. Do you have an updated? Thank you for coming. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for your questions. The Q&A is over. Thank you.
I can't hear you.
Do you have an updated net total for the week this morning?
So with regard to that, that's something that the Department of State Health Services is in charge of, and they constantly monitor it and update it on an ongoing basis. This is a process that you may have seen DSHS engage in response to COVID, and that they're doing the same thing with regard to the winter storm, and they will provide constant updates.
Great, thank you so much.